Welcome back to Brass Tacks. The other big story tonight, Prime Minister Modi has just landed in Samarkand in Uzbekistan. He will be attending the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. He will be sharing the stage with leaders of 7 other countries, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. While a bilateral with Putin is on the Prime Minister's packed agenda, the suspense continues on whether he will hold talks with Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the summit. With Russia, China and Iran, the summit seems to be taking an increasingly anti-West stand. And therein lies a big challenge for India: how to manage a balancing act. Let me now introduce our guests, if we have them. GVL Narasimha Rao is BJP Member of Parliament. He's joining us live tonight. Vishnu Prakash, former diplomat and spokesperson of the MEA, is also on the broadcast. Lieutenant General retired Shankar Prasad, former DG Infantry, also on the broadcast. Vishnu Prakash, I'll start with you, sir. Again, the first question that comes to mind is the SCO, of course, in the last 20 years of its existence, has evolved, has changed shape and form. Today, has the SCO, given the current geopolitics of the world, the Russia-Ukraine war, the tensions between China and Taiwan, has the SCO become some kind of an anti-US, anti-NATO talk shop? And if it has, what is a country like India doing in it?
Good evening. SCO has always had an anti-West orientation. In fact, it comprised and still comprises, other than India, of non-democratic, non-liberal countries. And you would recall, Zakka, that US had sought observer status, which was shot down. So that is the nature of SCO. And given the contentions at the moment, given the relationship between China and the US, Russia and the US, and Iran and the US, things are turning more hostile as far as our SCO is concerned. And that is why I think our friends in the West must be heaving a sigh of relief that a country like India is a member which will introduce transparency, moderation in the organization. But that apart, that is how the West looks at it. But from India's point of view, Zakka, if SCO was important yesterday, today it is even more important. And let me explain. Because it is one of its kind. It comprises of an adversary, a foe, and a number of friends. And it poses the biggest test possible for Indian diplomatic skills, which means that we would need to prevent an adversarial ties to turn into inimical. We need to contain the mischief of a foe and build ties with friends. It's easier said than done, but that is the kind of role that India would be playing. And the fact that we have many countries rooting for us, our Central Asian friends, Russia and so on, the task is cut out for us, but India will play a very increasingly important role. And now that we are also taking over the presidency, I think the role of India will become that much more important.
I want to go across, before I go to GVL and to General Prasad. Abhishek Jha's line has been re-established. He's joining us live from Samarkand. So, Abhishek, we know that there's a penciled-in scheduled bilateral with Russian President Vladimir Putin as well as the Iranian President. The big question, though, is will there be a pull-aside meeting with Xi Jinping of China and Shahbaz Sharif of Pakistan? What are you hearing?
So, Zakka, there has not been any confirmation from either side. Much of a speculation from media side. There has been for weeks speculation whether these two leaders, both India and China and India and Pakistan, will be engaging in any format. But given the fact that Prime Minister has expressed his grief and condolence over the recent flooding in Pakistan, we can assume at best that there could be some exchange of pleasantries. But so far there has not been any confirmation that these Prime Ministers will be having any formal, informal or pull-aside meeting. Talking about Chinese side, we have seen in the last week there was this disengagement that we can say that is in a positive direction as far as India-China's military standoff is considered for months. So there is a very slow but steady positivity in the relationship we can see. But will that be given more pressure or more force by some kind of exchange or meeting between the Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping is something that the world is in fact awaiting, because India and China are one of the two major members of SCO, and if there is a bilateral conflict or differences that persist, the overall broader contours of this organization remains unfulfilled, and the goals that will be set by the 8 permanent members, that needs all the members also to be on very much on same lines and in a very cordial relations, and this is something that SCO would like to
All right.
achieve.
Abhishek, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how this story plays out. 10 o'clock India time is when it begins tomorrow. Let me go across to GVL Narasimha Rao. You look at SCO as a forum, GVL. You have Vladimir Putin, you have Xi Jinping, both of them very anti-West, anti-US. You also have, as a dialogue partner, I believe, Erdogan of Turkey. Iran's Raisi is an observer, could likely become a full member either in this summit or the next summit. The question is, how does India balance being part of such a forum, and yet we are so invested in our relationship with the United States, we are part of the Quad. How does India balance both these ends?
No, I think the fact India's position being completely independent of our bilateral relations with both the US, Russia, China, and all of them. Our presence in SCO, as Ambassador Prakash said, only is reassuring to the Western countries that this does not become a kind of an anti-US, anti-West grouping. And India, I think, has actually brought some moderation and also a sense of balance to all these bodies, whichever multilateral body that we are a part of. I think India's presence actually makes it quite independent of any grouping of whether Russia or the China grouping or the US. Certainly, I think India's presence in all these groups also enables us to protect and promote our national interest. You see, what is foremost to us and perhaps to any country is to work all the levers of your foreign policy to work to its national advantage. And I think we have being attending the SCO meetings has certainly given us that additional leverage. And I don't think there should be anyone insecure about India's participation in whether it is in the Quad grouping or in the SCO.
Okay, let me ask General Prasad. Of course, the big backdrop to this is the India-China standoff. Just a few days ago, we had the pullback in the 4th place, which was PP15, Gogra Hot Springs. So I think in 4 out of the 6 places, there's been disengagement. 2 more, Depsang and Demchok, still remain. Do you see some kind of a bilateral meeting between Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines of the SCO? And really, do you see the relationship overall between India and China coming back to any sense of normalcy until disengagement happens in all places?
Zakka, first of all, let me say that this disengagement is important, but it is not really path-breaking. It is not something that we can say as a major achievement between India and China relationship. The standing policy of India, which has been enunciated by our foreign minister more than once, that unless this tension on the border is removed, unless the border issue is resolved, relationship cannot be normal. Yeah. We cannot just do economic activity without having to solve the border issue. Today, the important things are 2 and 3, which you've been talking about ever since the program started. Where does India stand today? India stands today at a very simple, straightforward position which the entire world has recognized. We were non-aligned at one point in time. Today we are multi-aligned. Today we have a flexible alignment. The whole concept of SCO seems to have undergone a change. We were earlier talking about the terrorism and things. With the Ukraine war, with the power centers emerging, with the East versus the West coming up, there are clear-cut positions where India today stands amongst all the 8 countries attending at the biggest advantage, and I would say. Okay. Today, our geostrategic location, geographically, our position as an economic power, emerging economic power, gives us a leverage to see that the Chinese come to table to negotiate with us more on economic front, in the bargain resolving the border issues. So these are two linked. The point that needs to be made in the SCO conference is this, that India is an emerging economy. If Chinese have to improve their economy and to be sustaining as a world economic leader, India is an important part of it. And therefore the India can only become an important part if you resolve the border issue to our satisfaction, which basically at the moment means removal from the Dipsang plain and Demchok. Dipsang plain is a very important strategic area for us, and there is no way we can let the Chinese sit there, as also Demchang. So therefore, today we are in a position to be able to talk to these people. Now the question is, should he meet the president of China? I don't see any harm. I don't see any harm in meeting if it's a bilateral or it's just a handshake, pullback handshake, as you may call it. But there is nothing wrong with it. In fact, I would go a step further to say there's nothing wrong in even meeting the Prime Minister of Pakistan and telling him clearly that you stop terrorism. We have extended a hand of friendship to you in the case of floods, but you have to come to table to talk to the matter, which is stop terrorism, and Kashmir is not in the agenda.
I was just going to come to that. I was just going to come to that. And if I can ask Ambassador Prakash about this, Prime Minister did tweet a few days ago expressing his condolences about the floods in Pakistan. There was some initial proposal to, I think, export wheat to Pakistan in a limited measure, again as a humanitarian gesture. But do you see any sort of formal traction in the relationship? It's been pretty much in the deep freezer, if you will. We don't even have ambassadors in both countries for the last couple of years at least. Do you see any kind of forward movement in the India-Pakistan bilateral relationship at the SCO?
Zakka, not at all. You know, the ball is absolutely in the Pakistani court. Yes, they are facing a calamity. We have expressed our sorrow. We have expressed our sympathy. If they were to seek India's assistance, I'm sure India will be more than happy to provide it. But this is one country which cuts the nose to spite its own face. If in this hour of need, where people are having difficulties, they are still discussing whether or not to import vegetables from India, you can see the kind of dysfunctional setup that obtains today. The situation in Pakistan is quite grim. Prime Minister Sharif is not in a position to deliver. His position is shaky. We have always been an initiator of a dialogue. We want a dialogue, but today they are just not in a position to commit anything. Why should we increase the standing of Sharif by giving him a meeting? For what? So I don't think the situation is ripe at all for a meeting. And similarly, when it comes to Xi Jinping, there can today be only one agenda, and that is to vacate the aggression. For that, you cannot see Prime Minister meeting with the President, because he is not going to negotiate. Their leaders are not going to negotiate. And Xi Jinping is not a person who is given to gestures. So unless that the aggression is vacated, I do not see any reason why the Indian Prime Minister should be meeting President Xi. Once the aggression is vacated, I'm all for engagement, all for discussions. But that does not, final point, courtesies, yes. Certainly, Prime Minister will and his Chinese counterpart should extend courtesies to each other. But a formal meeting, I am not in favor of.
Jivel, I also want to talk a little bit about, this entire meeting is coming in the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine war. It's going to go into its 7th month now. And that, of course, is having huge ramifications across the world in terms of inflation, in terms of the cost of living crisis, in terms of course, oil and gas prices. One of the pet peeves, if you will, that both Europe and the United States have with India and to an extent China as well, is that these countries, by buying Russian oil, are actually giving a breather to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, Zakka, but on all these matters which are completely internal to India, we have always stated that we will take what is in our national interest, and we are not going to be swayed by considerations of other countries. So I don't think they have tried in the past to exert such influence on us, but they have failed. And India will do whatever it takes, whatever is in its national interest. and will not go by selfish considerations of some Western countries.
No, but again, it comes back to, here you have a grouping where Russia and China are clearly dominant. I mean, they were the founder members of this grouping along with the Central Asian republics. India needs the Central Asian republics now more so than ever before. We need connectivity into the Central Asian republics. You're seeing what is happening in Afghanistan. We have a hostile neighbor in Pakistan. If we need trade and connectivity, we need a way in through Iran into the Central Asian republics. But we've been talking about this for 20 years, GVL. We've been talking about North-South corridor for the last 20 years. We've been talking about Chabahar again for the last 2 decades. Yes, there is some work that's going on there. But given how intensely hostile the Iranian regime is to the West, how long will we continue talking about these connectivity projects, and how long before we actually see connectivity happening through these countries?
No, these are certainly projects in works, Zakka. Certainly, we have not given up on these connectivity projects, but certainly there are challenges. And the government and the Ministry of both the Foreign Affairs and the Economic Affairs, they are in the process of sorting out these issues. There are challenges, I would concede, but it is going to take time, and we will our plans to invest in these ports have certainly created certain disturbance in other countries. But as I said, we will go ahead with our intentions, even though it may take longer.
Ambassador Prakash, I'll ask you that same question. I mean, I'm sure North-South corridor germinated when you were in active service. We still haven't seen that come through to fruition. And I think the need for the North-South corridor has been accentuated given what's happened between Russia, Ukraine, given what's happened in Afghanistan, and of course the frosty ties between India and Pakistan. All the more reason why we should be engaging with the Central Asian republics. But engagement can't be a means and an end in itself. I mean, it has to translate into real action on the ground.
Yes, it is a process, and it should have an objective. It should translate into something meaningful on ground. Zakka, it's not going to happen tomorrow. Let us be realistic. We were one of the first countries to establish a diplomatic presence in the Central Asian countries after the breakup of Soviet Union. Prime Minister Narasimha Rao visited these countries in 93 and 95, and then we dropped the ball. That area has been taken up by China. China's footprint has become very strong, economic footprint and so on. Russia's footprint is already there. But yes, we have historical linkages with Central Asia. We would like to boost the relationship. But connectivity is a big problem. And the North-South corridor is not going to get operational tomorrow. It is something that we'll have to work on patiently. So long as Iran's relationships are strained with the West, particularly with the US, there are going to be constraints. Then there is the Taliban. Then there is a friendly country called Pakistan. So this is a difficult terrain. There are obstacles, but the name of the game is to be patient and to look at possibilities, to explore, to press ahead. When will it happen? I do not know, but when it happens, it will be useful.
I like the way you put it, a friendly country called Pakistan. I don't think the sarcasm was lost on anyone. But General Prasad, let me ask you about that, because even domestically, does it make sense to engage with Shahbaz Sharif? Imran Khan there seems to be breathing fire. He seems to be threatening this current Pakistani government virtually every single day. We don't know the flux about who the next army chief is going to be. Will General Bajwa get another extension? Will there be a new army chief? Does it even make sense, pragmatic sense, to engage with Shahbaz Sharif? Again, there's great uncertainty about his brother, Nawaz Sharif, returning to Pakistan.
Zakka, please let us understand, I'm not talking about the summit between two leaders. I'm not talking about a summit between the President of China or the Prime Minister of Pakistan. It's a meeting of these heads of state, and if you shake hand and just have a pull-in, it makes no difference. I'm not suggesting a formal meeting with an agenda. The issue today is this: India is no longer a weak country. India is an economically strong country. India's position in the Committee of Nations is much higher today than ever it was before. Our foreign policy is being quoted as an example by the large number of countries saying national interest comes first. We will go wherever we need to go. If we need to go to the west, we'll go to the west. If we need to go to the east, we go to the east, and we will do what exactly we want. Therefore, this position of superiority, this position of power cannot be let go like this. Yes, there is going to be a more structured meeting perhaps with the Russian president, but certainly not a structured meeting with the Chinese or the Pakistanis. Yet, we have to project ourselves as a country which is economically strong, which means something great for China. They must see the light and come for a summit later. Unless we talk, unless we... Please don't understand the saying, let's make Jappi Maro to the Chinese Prime Minister, President and to the Prime Minister. No, we cannot. Because unless Pakistan amends its ways, in any case, Pakistan is in total shimozel today. This is the worst situation Pakistan has ever faced in their recent history. The natural calamities, the economic situation, the joblessness, the political commotion there, the military in a crossroad. Pakistan is in a very horrible situation. But that doesn't mean that we cannot shake hands at a meeting like this to show we are so much superior. We are so much stronger. We are a 7.7% GDP economy, perhaps the 5th largest economy in the world today. And the Chinese economy cannot survive without the Indian help. And look at the geographical location of India. Without us, the Quad cannot work. Without the Indian Ocean dominance of ours, the Chinese cannot work. Therefore, with our economic position, with our geostrategic geographical position, we are a very strong nation today.
Okay, I want to ask GVL that the fact that India today is the 5th largest economy and perhaps by the end of this decade could become the 3rd largest economy, obviously that economic heft is what is driving India's strategic importance as well in the Committee of Nations. Also the fact that India is going to be holding the presidency of G20 starting this year, and of course the summit will happen next year in India. How much of that is driving this whole process of Indian diplomacy forward, if you will, that India's heft is increasing on the world stage because of its economic power and then therefore, and as a consequence of that perhaps, its strategic importance?
I would consider that as one of the factors, Zakka, and not as the only factor or the prime factor, I would say. Certainly, our economic, our faster economic, rapid economic growth and the opportunities that it presents to the world is certainly an important factor. But India being a very successful democracy is a very important factor in my assessment. Third, a very popular leader and a very stable government. I think last 8 years, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has had not only a very strong popular support within India, but he has also established himself as as truly a world leader. We've seen how a number of surveys year after year show him as the most popular leader in the world. And certainly, I think these have increased India's heft much more than India being a large economy. That certainly has helped, but that's one of the factors. And India certainly today gains respect of the world, being a democracy and presenting itself as in a leadership role, both in terms of maintaining world peace, fighting terror, fighting corruption, fighting black money. I think on all these fronts, India has presented a very strong face. And that is what has contributed to India's emergence as a major voice in the world, and not just the size of the economy.
All right, I'll give the final word to Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. The one takeaway that you expect from Samarkand, from this SCO summit, what would that be?
I think India will walk back with the stature enhanced. The best part is that India has always played a constructive role, and we would. As I said, we will bring about moderation. We will try to introduce a more sense of purpose. There are today lots of contradictions within the SCO as it expands. It was a China-centric organization which was focusing on Central Asia. Today it is enlarging. So that is also one of the issue. Short point is that the involvement of India, the role of India will get strengthened and get recognized.
Right.
We'll come back holding our head high with greater respect and stature.
All right, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, GVL Narasimha Rao, General Prasad, thank you very much for joining us.